There we go. We are recording. Welcome, everybody. This is a freelancer's guide to protections, personal, professional, and financial considerations. My name is Erin McGregor. I oversee membership at Air Media, and I would like to introduce Eloisa El Toro, who is the executive director of JAWS. Eloisa, I'd love if you could give an overview of JAWS to everyone in the room.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to, first of all, just thank AIR, specifically Amanda and Erin, for all that you've done to help us pull together this webinar. I am the interim executive director of JAWS, the Journalism and Women Symposium, and thank you to all I see lots of familiar faces, so thank you to all of our JAWS members for being here today. We are a women's journalism organization, but we also support those who identify as women and non-binary. And we've been around for 35 years. We're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. So you will hear a lot more from us through our strategic partnerships, and we'll tell you a little bit more later about some of the other things that we're working on. Thank you, Erin.
Awesome, thank you. And we are the Association of Independents in Radio in collaboration with JAWS. So AIR has been around just about as long as JAWS, and we are many things. We are a talent directory. We are a nonprofit that supports independence in radio. We are mission driven. We like to support folks making important work, telling important stories. And our network is over 1,400 strong of journalists, podcasters, story editors, audio producers, documentarians, engineers, sound designers, media entrepreneurs, all of which who enrich our community. Eloisa, do you want to talk a little bit more about our partnership?
Absolutely. I should also share that JAWS has approximately about 400 members. And so we have members all over the United States. And our members also come from a variety of different sectors. So we're pretty diverse in a lot of different ways. So as far as our partnership, we actually have been partners with AIR for quite a while. I don't know exactly how long, but I know it's been a few years that we've had a partnership with you all. In the past, we've offered a member discount, but this year we decided to do a little bit more around programming, and we're going to do some social networking and hopefully some additional complementary type of things coming up in the future. So you all will be hearing more about some of that probably at the end or in the near future and some outside of this webinar.
Yes, I actually just posted our mixer on the AIR website today. I will post a direct link to RSVP to that in the chat. That will be happening May 20th, I believe at 6 p.m. Eastern, yes. So around this time on a Thursday evening. And that's really going to be an opportunity for AIR members and JAWS members to get to know each other and spend time with each other's networks, as we're now offering these really great mutual reciprocal memberships. And so if you are a JAWS member, you get a pretty steep discount on an AIR membership. And if you're an AIR member, you get a pretty steep discount on a JAWS membership. So we are also excited to be in collaboration with JAWS, but I want to say a few things before we start this event. Again, when we say women, we want to include everybody in the umbrella. And so women identified folks, non-binary folks, trans folks, this is definitely a space for you. I also want to offer a trigger warning that in this panel, we're going to cover a lot of sensitive ground, and we're going to talk about things like online harassment and sexual harassment and other kinds of abuse. And so I just ask that you take care of yourself in these moments. You know what feels good for you. I'd also say that feel free to remain anonymous. In this room, you can change your name by clicking on participants, finding your name and changing it, and you can leave your camera on or off. We are happy that you are here either way. The first hour of this event will be recorded and be made available later on. And when we open the floor for questions, we ask that you use the raise hand feature or direct your questions to the chat. I am so excited to get to announce our moderator. Dr. Michelle Ferrier is an award-winning producer and the founder of Trollbusters, a just-in-time rescue service for women, writers, and journalists experiencing online harassment. She is a digital content architect with 30 years of experience in media entrepreneurship and new media technologies. Dr. Ferrier is an award-winning columnist and author. She's featured in the Committee to Protect Journalists in 2016 edition of Attacks on the Press, where she wrote Progression of Hate, a chapter that tells her own story of hate mail attacks and the birth of Trollbusters as a solution for new forms of online harassment. She has presented before the United Nations on World Press Freedom Day as a keynote speaker on the Online News Association and as a panelist at the News Impact Summit hosted by the European Journalism Center and on the growing dangers of women journalists online. Michelle, please welcome and take it away.
Great, thank you. And thank you for everybody for being here today for this really critical and important panel. Erin mentioned the chapter that I wrote in the Committee to Protect Journalists publication, Attacks on the Press, back in 2016, which was a very prescient look at the upcoming 4 years that were signaled in that, and the rise of white supremacist movements here in the United States, and specifically the targeting of journalists and communicators by bad actors, whether they be white supremacist groups or political actors or others who are trying to shut down our voices online. So I'm here today to help corral and lead our conversation around a variety of different ways and places in which we come to harm as journalists and as communicators, especially in the digital environment and work in which we're operating today. On our panel today, we have two other female professionals who are going to be sharing from their perspectives the work on the financial and legal side, as well as on the practices and codes of practices that you might employ as part of your work as a freelancer or a communicator in this work. So as Erin mentioned, our first hour is going to be a series of short presentations by each of the panelists on their work, and I'll introduce each of us as we move forward. And then we will move to our breakout sessions in the second half hour, where you'll have an opportunity to be able to rotate among the professionals. And so we will have two opportunities in the second half hour for you to visit with one of the three professionals, myself or the other panelists. Then we will rotate you after about 20-25 minutes and give you an opportunity to sit in on another smaller session with another panelist. And these are a chance for you to have your questions answered specifically and to have a one-on-one conversation about specific cases and scenarios that we've experienced and how we might solve those. So the second hour is really more hands-on answer and question and answer, and give you an opportunity to be able to ask those questions that you might have. So to begin with, I'm going to kick off our presentations. I'm going to take you about 10 minutes to describe the work that I do with Trollbusters and the types of harms and protections that are necessary in order to be able to navigate digital spaces. And then I'm going to introduce in succession our other panelists and invite them to share kind of a watershed landscape view of the area that they work on and what's happening in that area, as I said, leading us into the second hour. All right, so let me, if I can, share my screen and share a little bit about Trollbusters with you. Great. So a little bit about Trollbusters. As we mentioned, the work that I do is in the deep web, the dark web, the interwebs, email, visible on memes and t-shirts and other places, and includes a lot of nastiness from a lot of people who would love to see us not be online as women, as people of color, and as journalists trying to tell the truth of what's happening in our communities and in our geographies. As part of my presentation, as well as others, there may be some explicit language, racist and sexual language displayed. Again, please use whatever self-care is necessary for yourself. I am the founder of Trollbusters. I am also a journalism educator and a journalist. The founder of the Media Innovation Collaboratory, which is a nonprofit startup accelerator for student innovations in the media space, as well as the home of Trollbusters, which is a project that started over 6 years ago to begin to, not to begin actually, to dive deeper into what was happening with the rise of white supremacists here in the United States around the time of the Obama administration. Some of that past work has been deep research into the global situation, particularly as we saw the rise of white nationalists and white supremacists and patriarchy across the globe. We saw political actors using online spaces in very unsavory ways. And I've done research as well as published and spoken international forums as well on examining exactly what's happening in these spaces, where these types of harms are happening, and how we might be able to solve both on an international as well as on a local level for the harms that come against both the individual journalist as well as the media enterprise. I come at this work because of my own experiences as a journalist and experiencing hate mail, as well as hate threats and death threats to me as a journalist and to my home and my family. So I come, unfortunately, with very deep experiences from my work as a columnist in Florida, where I experienced hate mail as a regular course of my job. Because this was back in the early 2000s, before we really had gone on to social media and using social media as a sourcing and distribution tool. And because I was African-American and the first African-American columnist at my newspaper, I received hate mail on a regular basis. And I received hate mail, particularly though, however, from one particular person that elevated my case with the Committee to Protect Journalists to the Department of Justice, right as Obama was entering his first term. And this chart shows you the rise of hate groups here in the United States. I began tracking white supremacist movement back almost 15, 20 years ago, when I first began experiencing this hate and trying to understand what was happening and how people were weaponizing the online spaces to attack truth tellers, journalists, communicators, and others. And you can see the rise of these groups through the Obama administration, the drop as he leaves office, and then the rise again through President Trump's administration, as he uses Twitter and other social tools as a dog whistle to rally these political groups and white supremacist groups and misogynist groups to these social platforms for coordinated attack. The research that we did, that I did in conjunction with researchers around the globe, looked at and to understand what are the ways in which these harms manifest, as well as the ways in which people are targeted. And some of the contributing factors deal specifically with geography, with the beat that you cover, the topics that you are writing on or covering, as well as kind of the larger environment, the changing reputation of journalists, and particularly here in the US, the increasingly hostile environment over the past 4 years that led to the activities in January and continuing threats and violence in physical space against journalists that manifested online. So some of our work moves into looking at and analyzing these threats, how they happen, the vectors of attack, whether it's email, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, and what are the remedies to be able to solve for that for you, as well as to help look at who those bad actors are and help do the digital forensics work necessary to bring those folks to justice and to be able to help you seek redress for the harms that come against you. Some of the work that we also do is training work to help you beef up your digital security and understand the places and ways in which you're at risk, both online and off, through the ways in which you do your journalism work. And so because as journalists, we do our work in a variety of different spaces and places. This is a global look at all of the different kinds of tools that we use. Unfortunately, this digital environment is a hostile one that has brought up a variety of different kinds of harms against journalists. As I mentioned, the environment and the current environment, including the continuing deplatform of our former president, as well as what was just happening this morning, where an NPR correspondent was scorched on Twitter because she suggested that she needed a bulletproof vest in order to do her job. And the response that came back from the web was that she's overreacting, which is typically the way in which the gender-based violence that comes across the internet is targeting specifically women journalists, those that are identifying as women, non-conforming journalists of color, are all those that are highly targeted with not only coordinated campaigns, but violence, highly sexualized, highly violent, as well as relationship. And when they're targeting gendered violence against women, they also target the relationships as well. And so the death threat won't come just to the journalist like it did for me, but it was targeting me and my family, therefore roping them into the harms of the work that I was doing. Other types of examples of the kinds of harms, candidates, people using the comment section to come at you and the work that you do. And as a freelancer, what are the types of recourse that you have with your client, with the law and with law enforcement to be able to try and seek some redress for your harms. Other different types of examples, like imposter websites. What if someone spoofs your portfolio and begins to use it to disseminate bad information that discredits you? Or you're a product of a storm or some other activities. These are the kinds of ways in which the internet has been weaponized, particularly against communicators and freelancers, because of you don't have that organizational structure, the legal structure, the employment structure to be able to lean on, as weak as that leaning is, to be able to do your work. And so you need the supports of someone who can help you navigate the technical, the management, as well as the legal framework to understand and help you seek redress for all the ways in which you might be harmed through doxing and swatting, or that gender-based kind of bullying, or the kinds of mob and swarm attacks that we've seen online. So Trollbusters takes a much more holistic approach to looking at the ways in which we do our work as communicators and the hostile digital environment, and helps to train you in not only staying secure in operating in those spaces, but thinking about your identity, the work that you do, and the intersection of those with technology and the bad actors who are attempting to try and shut down your voice. Some tips to protect ourselves. I'm going to leave a deep dive on this until our second hour and dive into some of these tips a little bit more as I bring up some questions. But there are multi-layered ways in which to think about the threats that come at you. And part of what we do in our work at Trollbusters is to help you think about where your vulnerabilities lie, what are the types of assets that you're trying to protect, and what do you need to do in order to be able to initiate protocols to help keep yourself, your family, and your work and your data safe. So with that, we will continue with some additional comments and a deep dive into some of those specific examples in the second hour. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn to our second presenter, Ms. Jéneen Perkins, who is our financial and legal consultant, who's going to be talking with us today about our money aspects and business aspects of setting up protections. Jéneen Perkins has studied financial concepts for money, credit standards, and taxation since 2002, and continues her pursuits in education to keep up with and stay fresh in the industry. She has a bachelor's degree in accounting from Cardinals Ridge and a master's degree in accounting from Keller Graduate School of Management. In 2011, she launched Accrue Enterprises, LLC, an accounting firm centered around small business and the self-employed. She also has experience as a business mentor, corporate accountant, and an independent tax preparer. Jéneen, help us navigate some of those tricky business choices that we have to make. Thank you, and welcome, Jéneen.
Good evening, everyone. This is my first Zoom presentation, so I might be a little rusty. I haven't been in a room, so to speak, with people in about 2 years. So bear with me as I get my bearings together here and share my screen and take you on what I will try to make a distilled journey along these financial and legal constructs as a freelancer, and what that means to be that in this day and age. So share. Uh-oh. Got it. Here we are. And we're going to start. So the main thing that I wanted to talk to everyone about is some general things that I've seen in the industry, especially with new freelancers, new self-employed folks, and things of that nature. The first thing that I always encourage my folks to do is to understand your value in the market that you're in. So here I have some quick links that will help you generally understand where you fall in the market. It's basically you put in a title, any title that you want to give yourself in any one of these, and it will give you what your dollar value worth per hour based on down to your zip code. So it can be really specific, but the one that I like to share the most is the one that's highlighted at the bottom. The reason for that is, and I'll slide that over here, is basically helping you pick your own target market your target annual salary. So with that being said, you have to look at other costs of doing business, things that you want, other incidental expenses, things of that nature. So I really usually have that first conversation when I'm talking to a new person, that basically that you need to look at those aspects of the business as well. So one thing that I always encourage new freelancers and self-employed people to do when you're looking to go into business with some, do some research on them, Google them, find out what their people are saying about them on the social media platforms that you have access to. Doesn't help to search them through your small claims court records to see how often they're suing people they're working with as well, because they may have a chance of screwing you out some money at the end or during your contract with someone. Sometimes it does help to read through LinkedIn recommendations, but I like to look at the social media interaction with the general public, not just, special contractors, friends, and things of that nature. See how people respond to my potential clients, respond to negative feedback on the web and in those social spaces as well. It says something to how they do business overall when, someone's not looking directly at them via Zoom or in person. So one thing that I learned in almost 10 years that I've been in business is that the contracts that you put in place as a freelancer are essential. Here are just some couple things here that I would like to say that I've learned that I usually share for free in my consultation is, KISS is the huge thing. You keep your contract simple, simple to read, simple to identify, money terms, things of that nature. If you don't know where to start, if you're a freelancer looking to work for a big company, you can ask them from an example contract from a previous contractor, or you could Google it, but Google it will overwhelm you. So, in our breakout room, I do have one here I'll show in picture, but we can examine that more together as far as, some key things that could be in place. Did I lose my screen? I'm sorry, guys.
You did. Sorry, I think Jéneen, you've still got, yes, thank you.
Thank you, sorry. So I'll go back to this one. This was where I was here. I apologize. In this overall screen here, the contract basis, we can talk more about those in the breakout session, but these are just some things that I learned the hard way throughout the years here. But the main thing is basically, I wanted to stress, you keep it old school, you just identify the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and you pretty much can be set if you're going out very much on your first contract there. So why you need contracts? Contracts are a form of protection in a legal sense, also from a stance of government. So contracts help you fight potential audits and things like that from a state and federal level, local level too, because they love to call freelancers employees from a tax standpoint, okay? Corporations also do not mind underpaying freelancers. So that's why I always encourage them to market research on what you're worth in your own industry, in your own backyard. Small businesses are always not aware of the rules of engagement. And what I mean by that, it may be a small business's first time creating a contract for a freelancer, or, going out and looking for specialty help that they can't find in the typical employment markets. So, you have to do some due diligence in helping that small business understand how to interact with the freelancer as well. I've seen this in some cases, not in particularly in my case, but other freelancers can and will use you for your own resources. So you make sure if you're doing a joint venture, a joint project, or anything of the sort, that you write everything down and get everyone to sign it, so you have a true understanding of the meeting of the minds there. And then contracts, some people like to say, oh, you can take my word for it, do a verbal commitment, a verbal agreement. Well, sometimes you can talk yourself into a contract that you may or may not want, that may not be lucrative for you. So writing things down, and as well as making sure that you are documenting your process through that is always key, okay? So here's an example one that I give to my independent contractors that are just starting out. They don't know what to do. It's basically fill in the blank. We work through this, we finalize it, and we punch it up, and then we get something solid on there. Very simple, easy to read. It always irritates me that financial contracts are very, very, what I want to say, very filled with $10 and $15 words. Most people don't know how to read above an 8th grade level. You have to kind of get into that sense when you're dealing with folks who are not financial savvy. So all my contracts, even with my existing clients, are very easy to read. And we just make everything straightforward and digestible for everyone. So we'll break into that. But one of the ways that you can do, some of the ways you can do, is develop some financial routines and plans. And I know that kind of sounds weird in a sense, but more so, if you get in the habit of understanding that there are some common things that all professional services providers, writers, artists, graphic design artists, architects, engineers, accountants, lawyers, doctors, we all should have some financial routines and things and construct in place. One of the first things I always encourage people, if you have some type of liability insurance that protects your ability to make money after a mistake, buy it. So I always encourage folks to buy some professional liability insurance. One way to protect your personal assets from your business endeavors is consider forming a business entity, an LLC, a corporate S corp. Those are all some avenues there that we can talk more about in the breakout sessions. But it really just depends on the nature of the industry that you're in most cases, whether or not one form is suited for you or the other. Another thing that you can do to keep yourself protected is separate your personal funds from your business funds. Even if it's just as simple as making one transfer from one account to another, please keep those separated. I don't know how many times I've had people come into my office saying, hey, I have this audit letter from the IRS or the state, and I don't have any documentation. Well, let's look at your bank statements. Look at the bank statements, and everything is just slushed together. You know, you open yourself a fair game from that perspective. One thing is key is track the work that you do when you're doing it and how long does it take you to do. Too many times in the beginning, someone tried to shortchange me based they didn't think I had put in the amount of hours on a project, when in fact, I keep track of my own time clock and what I've done and a list of accomplishments to give them at the end if they so wanted. But that in itself saved me thousands of dollars on one contract. So I strongly encourage you to find some of that. Get in a regular habit of billing people. Sometimes as freelancers, you can fall into a habit of giving away stuff for free. If you do a routine of going through completing the work that you did and actually sending an invoice for that on either a monthly or weekly or bi-weekly basis, or some kind of system, even if you're creating the invoice in Excel or Word and sending it to somebody, make time for that, at least, as an interval that's comfortable for you. Creating and following a budget. Review it at least monthly, so you make sure you're hitting some realistic goals there, but also that you're also tracking some progress and some success for yourself. Pay yourself first. I can't stress that enough. Always pay yourself first, but in the sense that, you're not overextending or living beyond the means that you're earning at that given point in time. And then two, if try to save, you must save some money for expected tax liabilities down the road. So now, when I talked about some of those financial routines, if you don't know where to start, one of my favorite new things that I found in 2020 is called Bonsai. It is like a freelancer's dream. Loved it. I did a tour of it myself. If I had the capability to have all my team host and do all their tasks from my accounting perspective there, I would have. Now, the thing I love about it most, it tracks your tax liabilities for you. So every time you make a move, send a bill, upload a receipt, it's helping you do that. But it also gives you the CRM and the project management tools you help to keep track and organize your work more effectively. And you can communicate with clients through there. So if anyone's ever interested in checking it out, they do offer a free trial. I can see that. And they also have that neat Loom video there that shows you a brief tour of what's going on there. So my last thing that I want to stress with people as far as financial and legal protection, there should always be 5 people in your phone. Okay, from a business perspective. And I still have these 5 people in my personal Rolodex at any given time. One is a mentor. So as a freelancer, someone who's thinking you're on a well-tracing path, someone has did it before and someone has some knowledge out there that can share with you. Do not be afraid to ask for, hey, can I just, pick your brain about a situation I'm going through, or can you look over my contract and see if it's okay? Even if it's editing a piece or reviewing it, you need to find someone or a group of people that can be a soundboard for you. An attorney, reason being, they can help you figure out that correct legal structure, help you draft those and review those contracts, make sure you're not getting shafted at the end of at some end of a contract. An insurance agent, An insurance agent can most definitely help you pick the right source of protections that you need from a digital space. I know in my industry, I know I can buy cyber insurance. So they may be something for every other industry. An accountant, obviously someone like me or someone else like me, we are always good to have in there just in case we can do some what ifs planning with you. And then a banker. Bankers also having a good relationship with your banker can actually stave off some potential financial hacks down the line. All in all, when I was working for a major financial institution here in Wisconsin, just because we knew the relationship the customer had with this money, we were able to identify potential fraud. So, you know, make sure you're keeping a regular in contact with your financial person. So that's where I'm gonna stop off here. My contact information is there, but I also look forward to meeting more of you in the breakout rooms. Thanks.
Thank you, Jéneen. And that was a lot packed into this 15 minutes. I appreciate it. And hopefully you all have a lot of questions for her that you can follow up on. Do you see a quick hand raised? Carla?
Yes.
Yes.
I was just wondering if she could show the page that had the links to how much you're worth.
Oh, yes, most definitely. I can do that again. And then
Thank
also
you.
too, I can see probably with Aaron, if we can share whatever, whoever wants what after this as well. I most definitely can, but
Jéneen, actually, if you could pop that link to that page right into the chat, that would be really super helpful.
yep, absolutely.
That-
Yep, but here it is again, if someone wants to screenshot it, and I will put that in the chat as well.
Okay, great. And I'm going to introduce our next person, who is Amanda Hickman from AIR, who is going to be talking with us about AIR and the Code of Fair Practices and the work that they do to help look at what are the ways in which you conduct your business that you should make sure that you keep yourself protected. Amanda is the managing director of AIR, where she leads their work on fair practice, contracts, and rates. She has a long history of working at the intersection of journalism and civic engagement, as well as working with journalists and newsrooms to foster creative approaches to storytelling, data analysis, and forging relationships with audiences. She's also a member of the Unicode Consortium and a mentor and editor with Emoji Nation. She takes great pride in bringing safety thread.
Safety pin, thread, and yarn, and the sewing needle.
Keyboards everywhere. I had to look and see what the heck those little emojis were. Thank you, Amanda, for the laugh, and take it away.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I had my screen all set up to present, and now it's doing its full screen. I am also going to drop a couple of resources into the chat that I think will be helpful for folks. One of the things that AIR has done a lot of work and research on is what fair rates look like. And I don't think we've got, get my sharing, there we go. Oh, that, wow. Sorry, I'm a little nervous about that. I should have only shared the browser window and you guys got to see my chat. So you saw me. Okay. I might frantically stop screen sharing if I think I've done something terribly wrong, but I think I'm only sharing this one window. But don't DM me anything personal while we're, don't send me anything personal in the chats right now, because I think the chats are showing up on this screen share. But I want the chat. I did want to share a couple, I will drop them in at the end. I wanted to share a couple of resources in addition to our work on the Code of Fair Practice. We've done a lot of research around rates in specifically radio and podcasting. And prevailing wages in media across the board. And those I think are really important for figuring out what's fair when you're setting up a project rate, figuring out what what that project is going to look like in terms of days worth of work, and then what those days are going to look like in terms of like what's a fair day rate. And pinning your own day rate to staff salaries isn't always like the best and only option, but it certainly is a good option. I'm super aware that I do not see myself. Are you?
You can be seen. We can see
Okay.
you.
It's fine. I actually don't mind not seeing myself, but I was like, I see Michelle down in the speaker window. It's a little, okay. So just, I will share some resources about rate research as well, because that's something we've done a lot of work on. And as I was saying, I think pinning your own rate to salaries in the industry isn't always the best. Like lots of salaries are also not adequate, but at least it's a good way to get, to find one kind of like point of parity with what other people are getting paid and think about kind of what's fair. I really wanted to talk about, our code of fair practice though. One of the really fundamental imbalances of the freelance landscape, and this is true across the board, it is not by any means limited to journalism, is that you'll never work for an outlet that has not had a lawyer review their standard contract. It's never going to happen. But often, especially if you're doing a small piece or a public radio feature, what they're paying you for that one-off feature is not nearly enough to justify you having a lawyer review every single contract that you sign. And that's a really big imbalance. And this is where I will tell you that you should never sign a contract without having a lawyer read it first, but also that I know you're going to do that. So one of the things that the Code of Fair Practice is really useful and valuable for is identifying some of the things that you should be looking for in contracts, and also, and I think this is really important, providing some language and some kind of like institutional heft behind the things that you're asking for. Instead of saying like, poor sweet little me, freelance journalist, I don't like this contract and I want you to change it because of my own opinion. We'll say, look, it's not just me. AIR clearly states in their Code of Fair Practice that this isn't fair. Can make the difference in an argument, because it's a lot harder to argue. It's a lot harder to argue with AIR. And one of the things that we heard when we were working on some of the earlier iterations of the code is that people often were told, oh, I know that contract language can be really confusing. And this is from people who are saying, no, there's not actually anything confusing about it. I'm asking for a kill fee, and it's not in the contract. Like this isn't about confusing contract language. It's about inappropriate contract language. And so some of the kind of contract pieces that we highlight and talk about in the Code of Fair Practice are kill fees. You should have one. 50% is, I think, a reasonable minimum. Minimums will vary, but making sure that you have a plan in place if the story gets killed and that you don't do all that work and then just not get paid. Payment terms, not only clear terms for how soon you need to get paid, whether it's 15 days after the invoice is supplied or 30 days, but real clarity that you shouldn't be subsidizing a production, especially for a production that goes on over several months. You should not be subsidizing this production by bearing all the expenses and waiting until the very end to get paid. You should have some payment plan in place so that you get paid a bit when you sign the contract and start working, a bit at a kind of center deliverable point, and then that final payout at the end of the project, and that's reasonable. And I just want to flag that I believe that Quinn, who is the attorney who worked with us on this most recent version of the Code of Fair Practice, is here listening. And I just want to really thank her for her work on that. Because really, like, I can't stress enough the importance of that, especially as you think about going beyond a kind of one-off piece that might be less than $1,000 to something that you're going to be working on for months. The importance of not waiting until the end of that project to get paid is really important. The other thing that we talk about in the Code of Fair Practice that we're seeing increasingly, especially for folks who are working for kind of emerging, maybe venture-backed and private sector outlets, is really inappropriate non-competition and non-solicitation clauses. And so just really flagging that no, you did read that correctly. And that's one of the things, like, people would come to me and say, oh, I read this contract and it says it's a standard non-compete clause, but it sounds like it's saying I can't work in radio or I can't work in podcasting for at least 2 years after I work on this 2-month sports figure bio. And that is indeed what it says. And the fact that someone's gonna have a very hard time actually pursuing that clause in court doesn't mean that you should just sign the contract. It means you need to go back to them and say, look, this isn't appropriate, and here's why it's not appropriate. Also, some things to look for on warranties and indemnity. Indemnity is something that I think some folks, especially on the investigative side, get really anxious about. And I think we have some resources that we're going to be rolling out later this year to help kind of, I would say, like, soothe your anxiety, but help you make kind of reasonable decisions about when an indemnity clause is going to be problematic. Also, my mail has arrived and the mailman is having a very loud speakerphone conversation on my porch. There's a bunch of other things in the Code of Fair Practice that are also important, but not necessarily contract connected. Spec assignments, asking you to complete work on spec sort of will decide when you file it whether we'll pay you or not, and like the reasons why that's not an acceptable way to work. Ways in which staff changes kind of like midstream create additional work and need to be negotiated or addressed in terms of the additional work that they create for you as a freelance reporter. Credits, the importance of access to ethics policies, conflicts of interest policies, standards of reporting, not assuming that everyone has the same understanding of those policies and that outlets need to be sharing those. And that as journalists, this is the other piece of kind of, it's a two-way conversation, that as journalists, we need to be alert to asking for those and not just assuming, because every outlet has standards. And I just wanted to flag that there's a couple of things that are really not covered in the code that we see and that I get questions from AIR members about from time to time. One is non-disparagement clauses, which show up sometimes in a contract to do reporting work or to produce a story of some kind, a commitment that you will not disparage the outlet. And it's one thing to see those in like a severance agreement where you're leaving an organization and they're offering you some kind of severance in exchange for not trash talking them. Like, that's fairly common. Asking for a non-disparagement agreement when you begin working with someone who you haven't worked with before is pretty broad. And the other thing that we don't really address is like what we're seeing increasingly expansive licensing clauses and how you make decisions about what kind of licensing is appropriate at the rate that the outlet is compensating you. So those are two places that I'm hoping we can kind of expand a little bit in the coming year. So that's one really vital resource is our Code of Fair Practice. It is a great resource. It can help you really navigate contracts. And I wanted to flag that, like, even with our Code of Fair Practice, you might need a lawyer. And so I will share this resource. This is a resource that we keep on our site that's available. That's a really great roundup of resources that are available to independent journalists, independent news outlets, and freelancers in general, and artists, because in a lot of cases, there's a lot of crossover, especially around kind of like fiction productions and storytelling. A lot of our members are doing storytelling as well. There are a lot of resources that can help you get answers to legal questions. The other thing that I want to say, and I think one of the things that came up a lot when we were talking about kind of putting this panel together was, I kept hearing, as freelancers, we don't have any rights, we don't have any protections. And I just want to be really clear that that's not true. There are lots of states where existing employment law explicitly extends to contractors and independent contractors and freelancers working for the company. And certainly in California and in New York and California, employers are actually obliged to extend protection from harassment and some of those protections to independent contractors. New York City has a really fantastic law called the Freelance Isn't Free law, which is a really fantastic resource for ensuring that you don't get ghosted by clients and applying some legal penalties to clients who ghost you. And I'll share some resources about that in the chat when we wrap up. But just wanting to be really clear that, like, first of all, you definitely have rights. That doesn't mean it's always straightforward to exercise them. And I think one of the things that I really was reminded when Michelle was talking was that that was happening in a staff role, right? Like it is, none of this is limited to freelancers, though as freelancers, we are much more isolated. But a lot of workplaces don't handle this well with staff, right? Like there are not clear-cut best practices around training and guidance that reporters need in the field. There are emerging best practices, but they're not, this isn't something that newsrooms are doing really well across the board. And in conjunction with that, I also will share, when I get my chat back, a bunch of resources, especially around online harassment, where there are a lot of resources about what you can do to support yourself and what newsrooms should be doing to support staff. But that's a tiny piece of what reporters experience. And so there's a lot of places where we're just not getting the resources that we need, and staff reporters aren't getting it either. But as freelancers, we're a whole lot more vulnerable. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Michelle, and I think we're going to do some breakouts.
Great. So thank you. And thank you, Amanda. A lot of information there. I'd ask that you move Trollbusters. We do a lot more than just student work in this area and provide a lot more direct support to people who are experiencing harassment. We have about a couple of minutes. Do we want to dive right into our breakouts, Erin? So do you want to set us up for our breakouts and how you're going to do that? And we'll move into our breakouts.
Yeah, great. So my understanding of the breakout rooms is that folks are going to get put into rooms at random, but what I'm going to try to organize is that Dr. Michelle Ferrier is going into breakout room 1, that Jéneen Perkins will go into breakout room 2, and you can find Amanda Hickman in breakout room 3. And so just the order that you saw the presentations in today. And I am going to send everyone on their way, and then please feel free to direct message me or Eloise El Toro, and we can get you sorted into the right room. Again, we're going to do 2 of these sessions for about 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, the breakout room will kick you back into the main room, and then we'll send you back out again into another room. This is my full disclosure. This is my first time driving breakout rooms. And so we're just going to have to see how it goes. At this time, I just want to say on the record one last time, thank you to everyone who is here. I am going to stop recording now. And there we go.